So just did a run with this build on Annie, but wanted to talk through some other build options for her. First, let's just take a quick look at her constellations. She focuses primarily around spell and skill damage. With her 3-star, your spells and skills deal 2 extra damage. Then she does get this raiding party, which allows you to buff up your deck just from dealing damage to the Nexus. I don't think this particular build around, but it's handy. You get some stronger units from this. The 6-star is really good. Your skills activate an additional time, so you can get multiple procs. I don't have this yet, but this is especially good for her. If you're using certain relics, there are relics that give you skills as well, so that can be really good. Her 2-star just gives you a fleeting guile, which lets you stun an enemy for 1 mana. So this helps you to stay a little bit safer on turns where you're defending. Then on the bonus stars, ones of note, I would say this one, the supporting champions have Luden's Tempest, is probably the best one here. I unfortunately don't have this one yet, but this is quite good. The rest of these, not too important. The Death's Hand having Charging Sigil is certainly nice. Spells you acquire in Adventures having Hextech Fabricator just gives you common items, which is alright, but typically you're not working so much on board power, you're more focusing on like those spells and skills as we mentioned. So let's take a look at build options for her. The thing that's quite handy with the spells and skills, Shock and Awe is really good for her because she's a 1-cost. It counts as an extra skill. If you have her 6-star, this will trigger twice for every single 1-cost you have on the board. So this can be extremely strong. If you don't have this, though, you can, certainly just focus on the spells and skills you acquire throughout the game. You can always substitute this out for something else spell-related. Either, Luden's or other spell things, like things that give you spell mana, like archangels or things. We'll go through some of those in a minute. Big guns, similar reason, just more spell damage. That's what we're using there. Again, if you don't have big guns, you can use something like Luden's. Unfortunately, you can't use multiple Ludens. You can only get 1, so no way to get more copies of this. Otherwise, that would probably be extremely good for her. But just doubling down on spell damage, always a good way to go with her. One thing also to note in terms of spell damage, there's the icon of Vol here. This is another way to get spell and skill damage for elemental skills. So her skill, this does count as an elemental skill. I don't know if there's a way to show that, but the attack that it does count as elemental. Will deal 2 damage to enemies to the blocker, and so this is what the skill is, and it has the elemental tag, as you can see there. So that does work with the icon of Vol here. So that's another way to get more spell damage. This Death's Foil is primarily to protect her when she's attacking in, but you can always just change this out for something like, let's see, anything with Challenger. So if we just say Challenger here, any of these, Deadly Harpoon, not quite as good on her just because you get the death from below. Doesn't really help you, but full build, good. Apprehend is very good because this also stuns. You can do things with the stuns as well. So this is very nice. Laurent Blade Rack, also great. Give your whole board Challenger. And if you don't have that, there's always the Grand Duelist Blade. So this can just help make sure that whoever's blocking her is taking enough damage from this. Or if she's leveled up, then her blocker gets stunned, so she won't die. So you can also just make sure you're using the stun feature from her level up if you're at that point. So then I think other potential builds, there is sort of a funny thing you can do. I don't have the relic, one of the key relics for this myself, but her champion spell is Disintegrate, which is typically 2 cost, but because of her level ups and whatnot, it actually gets the mana potion and it gets this draw. So it becomes a 1 cost with draw. So actually, if you use Echoing Spirit on her, it becomes free when you're using the champion spell version of her. So if you're using either Echoing Spirit or if you use Searing Brilliance, either one of these, if she only has 2 starting spells in her deck, I wouldn't say, I would say Echoing Spirit would be more reliable than Searing Brilliance in this case, just because you typically want to draft more spells with her that'll deal damage, and then Searing Brilliance will likely hit those other spells. So I think this is a better way to go about getting the cost reduction, and you're more likely to get more copies of her. But then if you also use Gale Force, and the one relic I don't have here is Twin Drakehounds. So what this will do is effectively, if you have multiple copies of Annie in your hand, you can use those on their units. You attack in with Annie. If they block with any of those units, they'll die to her power. But then when you attack in your second time, that will deal 2 damage to their entire board, and anything that you've marked with her spell, her champion spell, will die. And like I said, because it's 0 cost basically, you can use it as many times as you have copies of Annie in your hand, and every single time you'll draw a card. So you can potentially draw, like as you shuffle those Annies back into your deck, you can potentially draw them and use them even more times. And this is just a way to, no matter how strong their board is, how much health they have, you could potentially remove their entire board with just this combo. So, and even if they remove Annie, with Echoing Spirit, you're likely to have a lot of copies of her, and you can run this again. So, sort of a funny build you can try out if you have Twin Drakehounds. I wouldn't typically, this is one of the worst relics in the game, which is why I don't have it. It's really hard to find characters that can leverage the double, like attacking in multiple times in a turn. And typically in higher level adventures, dealing 2 damage to their whole board is really not that significant. The only champions that can really leverage that well are like Annie and Spirit Blossom Kindred. And so, and for the Spirit Blossom Kindred one, you'd also want the 6-star from that, which is quite difficult. Excuse me. Sorry. Anyway, then let's see here. Other things, we can just go through the standard spell-related stuff. Before we get to that, just one other thing that can work with her in terms of scaling her spell damage. She does have a lot of things that stun, so if you have Last Whisper, you can use that as well. That can help scale. This only scales skill damage though, so it's okay. I wouldn't say it's great on her. I don't use it on her typically, but she does get that Guile in your hand. That's a guaranteed stun. She also has units in her deck that stun. So like this guy, he can stun, as well as Tibbers. When you get him, he can stun. Those are all options there. Oops, didn't mean to change champions. Which actually, that reminds me, with Tibbers, she also has her relic, which gets you a couple more Tibbers in your deck and reduce their cost by 2. So that way you end up with a 2-cost 10/10. which is also very strong, so this can be quite good on her. The further you get into an adventure, the less likely you are to draw these Tibbers, so a little bit less power, but when you level up, you automatically get one, and having that be 2 cost as well as stronger is quite good. So I typically focus more on her spells and skills rather than dropping one big unit, but can certainly make a difference, especially if this is, a first turn drop of a 10/10. That can be really good. So, yeah, other things with spells and skills, of course, anything dealing with spell mana, helping you cast out more spells. This is going to be just good on her. No particular build around with this. And of course, the other things that get you spell mana, like Archangel Staff or other things like that. Also, always good. Chemtech Duplicator, if you're getting up to, that 6+ mana, then that'll be good just for duplicating more spells, getting more damage into their Nexus. Crown Guard Inheritance, always good with her. Just, if you're leveling up when you're attacking in, getting another full attack, you can always do the standard sort of Crown Guard Inheritance along with the Tempest Blade to stun their whole board, get another set of attacks in with all your units, and that can often do them in alone as long as they don't have tons of health for their Nexus. We already mentioned Ludens. We mentioned the Laurent Blade Rack for pulling stuff in. I think in terms of the other spells, of course, Grand Generals is another way to just get fleeting copies of her in your hand, either to replace her if she gets removed because she's easy to be removed, or to just get this Disintegrate, which is quite cheap and can, guarantee removal of big units. So that can be very strong for you. Then on the common relic side, if we just go to, we can, use this sort of summon stun if you're doing more of a sort of stun-based build. Also, the refill your spell mana. Ravenous Hydra can be okay if you're trying to use her spell. The hard thing with this is if you already have her on board, then you're not getting the benefit from this. So you won't be able to have her on board, use your champion spell. You would need to remove her, then drop her again to get that same sort of effect of dealing damage to their whole board and removing it. Same with Wicked Harvest if you were doing that, dropping her and dealing damage to their whole board. This can be effective though. She is cheap, especially if you have Echoing Spirit, you have multiple copies of her, or if you're using, Grand Generals again. So using copies of her to just repeatedly drop her and remove their board. This will hit your board as well, so be aware of that. But yeah, using her champion spell and then dropping her again can be an effective way to remove big threats from their board with combos like that. I think those are most of the main things for building around her. Of course, there's the standard Oath of Guardians. I've talked about that in most of my build guides for any cheap champion. I might put together a separate guide just for sort of standard builds that can be used across any character, just to stop from talking about that build in every single one of these cheap champion builds. But this is essentially you just toss down a cheap champion with 2 star gems. Oops, I don't want epics. Here we go, star gems. So this will, get you some 5 or get you 5 level 2 champions in your deck with double stats. You draw one of them, they're going to be really cheap to put out because of the cost reduction from the double star gem, and then you have a big unit on the board right away. So yeah, that's always a build option for pretty much any 1 to 3 cost champion. Really good. So that's about it. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know if there's other champions you would like to see, and I'll try to cover them in a future video. Have a good one.